The Olympic movement aims to build a peaceful and better world and promote a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play, but that does not mean the Olympics has been without its controversies and scandals. The Olympics has been boycotted by nations on numerous occasions. In 1976, 29 countries, mostly from Africa, boycotted the Montreal Games after the IOC allowed New Zealand to compete. The biggest boycott came 4 years later at the 1980 Games in Moscow, when more than 60 countries, including West Germany, refused to compete. The boycott was initiated by the United States in protest against the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. 4 years later, at Los Angeles 1984, the Soviet Union staged a revenge boycott. The biggest doping scandal to hit the Olympics was Russia's state-sponsored scheme, which operated for 4 years from 2011 to 2015 across what investigators found was the vast majority of Summer and Winter Olympic sports. In 2019, Russia was handed a 4-year ban from all major sporting events by the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, after Russia's anti-doping agency, RUSADA, was declared non-compliant for manipulating laboratory data handed over to investigators. It had to hand over data to WADA as a condition of its controversial reinstatement in 2018 after a 3-year suspension for the doping scandal. The Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, later reduced the ban and ruled that clean Russian athletes could compete at the Olympics and other international events, but the team could not use the Russian flag or anthem. Athletes from Russia competed as Olympic Athletes from Russia, OAR, at the 2018 Winter Olympics, and as the Russian Olympic Committee, ROC, at Tokyo 2020. Russia has had more than 40 Olympic medals stripped because of doping violations. It remains under sanctions for Paris 2024 because of its 2022 invasion of Ukraine, and Russians will compete as individual neutral athletes, AIN, at this year's Games. The IOC is against the politicization of the Olympics, but the effects of politics on the Games have often been felt. In 1936, the Berlin Olympics were used by Adolf Hitler as a showcase for Nazi propaganda, which promoted the superiority of the Aryan race. 10 days before the opening ceremony of the 1968 Games in Mexico City, more than 200 students were killed by the military as they protested against the authoritarian Mexican government. At that same Games, Black Americans Tommie Smith and John Carlos, who had won gold and bronze respectively in the athletics 200m, each raised a black-gloved fist on the podium during the U.S. national anthem. Their Black Power salute was a defiant statement against the systemic oppression of Black people in the U.S. and marked a defining moment in the history of civil rights activism. Smith and Carlos were later expelled from the Games because of the ban on political statements. 4 years later in 1972, the Munich Olympics were overshadowed by what became known as the Munich Massacre. Demanding the release of more than 200 Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails, 8 members of the Palestinian Black September militant group broke into the Olympic Village and killed 2 members of the Israeli team, taking a further 9 hostage. A botched rescue attempt by German police led to the remaining hostages being killed, as well as 5 of the militants and 1 police officer. During the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, a bomb was detonated at the Centennial Olympic Park, directly killing 1 person and injuring more than 100 others. It was the first of a series of bombings by Eric Rudolph, who later stated his hatred of the federal government and of abortion and gay rights as his motives.